All right, welcome in. Important Nonsense, 32 teams in 32 days. I'm excited to be here. Nonsense Steve. It's like a family reunion, but with people you actually like. It's a reunion of the OG Locked In crew.
I get it. I get it, Steve. You like seeing V and I because we make you a lot of
100%.
money on our bets all season long. So I get it, as the, masterminds behind Locked In, the weekly betting show here at Important Nonsense. I do have to pat myself and V on the back. So,
Mm.
how are you doing today, partner? How's the off season been treating you?
Off season has been great, but it is just about that time for us to get back in the swing of things. So super
Well,
excited for that.
you guys are sports betting. What off season? Come on now. I'm surprised you guys weren't in the chat about WNBA like everybody else this summer.
No, betting 3 a.m. ping pong like
Where
always.
yeah, where do you think I get this bankroll to start this season? I can't give away all the, dime a dozen picks out of the WNBA that I got there. So
That's right. That's true. Well, I enjoy the money, but I also do enjoy the company, gentlemen. So happy to be here with you. Today, we are talking about the Los Angeles Rams of Anaheim. Actually, I believe it is still actually just Los Angeles. We are recording this on the 8th of August. So if anything seems a little bit dated, that would be why. Everything, of course, 12 team PPR using the Fantasy Pros ADP statistics and all that fun jazz. Kicking it off from the top, Matthew Stafford, quarterback. Still, he's back. And I don't mean to throw back in there because I know he's had a history of those problems. I didn't. Apologies, no pun intended. QB 19 in the rankings. QB 19 also in ADP. Good enough for halfway through the 12th round. He feels like that could be a value if he stays on the field. Big question mark. Vishaal, how you feeling about Matthew Stafford this season?
I think that's tremendous value if you're somebody like me who likes to you typically wait on quarterbacks in a one
Mm-hmm.
quarterback league. I think that's tremendous value when you see guys like I don't know Jaden Daniels going in the top 12.
Right.
Why take a risk like that when you can wait like 5, 6 rounds, take Matthew Stafford, and then fill up your team with a bunch of running backs and receivers just so you have, more shots on target so you have a better chance of actually hitting. Why risk taking, obviously some of these guys have very high upside, but there's such a higher risk when you can just relax, have Matthew Stafford, maybe take somebody else a couple of rounds later in case you're worried about injuries. But, that feels like tremendous value. It's very, very high floor for me on Stafford.
yeah,
Yes.
I echo that same sentiment, V. When we talk about if anybody's been following along on our 32 teams in 32 days, they already know that we are an outlet that does prefer to wait on quarterback. That is kind of the sentiment that we like to run, especially when you play in, as Neil puts it, God's format, the Lord's format, one
He's not wrong.
quarterback.
Praise be.
So when you do that, it does make sense to kind of sit. And this is the reason why. Because you can get deals like this later on, and the drop off isn't horrendous because they do possess a ton of passing ability, and that's exactly what Stafford has. When you look at his weapons, what we'll get into a little bit later, he's got a good unit there. And when we look at when you look at drafting a quarterback in general, I think you have three ways to kind of approach it. We see those guys in the tier one, and they're usually the cream of the crop. They can throw the ball, but they pretty much have to have some sort of rushing floor that's going to give them stability throughout the season. And that's why guys like Josh Allen are always up there, Lamar Jackson, because they give you that rushing floor. Then you have kind of like what V was just alluding to with the Jaden Daniels thing. And I'm the Jaden Daniels guy. That's my flag plant for most of the offseason, is that Jaden Daniels is a lot better than advertised. And I think that those kind of guys fall into the tier 2 and the tier 3. And then the guys that have the huge offensive output potential, but maybe not the rushing floor, guys kind of like Dak, Tua, they kind of fit in there. And then you get into this tier, which is what I would call the safe and reliable tier. So when we look at what Stafford was able to do last year, yes, if you don't get the rushing floor or the explosive output potential. Now the Rams are going to be a good offense, productive, but I don't see them being one of these, setting the world on fire type of offenses. So if you are one of those guys, you better be safe with the football. And Stafford was exactly that. He had a career best year last year in 2023 with only 2.1% turnover worthy play percentage. And that takes into account things like your interceptions thrown that were your fault, the dropped interceptions that were your fault, and things that are also like fumbles in the pocket where you put the ball in danger. That encompasses all of those. And he was very good, top 8 in the league, just 12 turnover worthy plays. So when you look at that and you're kind of, I don't want to say punting on quarterback because you still are having to, invest. It's not your like last pick or whatever. Right. But when you do wait a little bit, this is the type of guy you want to look for, and is, truth be told, the guy that I'm targeting in a lot of my drafts at this range. So
yeah, I'm right there with you guys. We kind of alluded to this circling back, not just that I pay attention only to the episodes I'm on. But Mason, when you and I were on with Mike doing the Bears, we were talking about 9th, 10th round. Are we willing to pay that price for Caleb Williams? And this was kind of my example of, yes, I would take that shot on Caleb Williams in the 9th or 10th, because I know in the 12th round, I could get a Matthew Stafford, an Aaron Rodgers, a Baker Mayfield, some veteran that I know if I had to, I can count on them every single week. But Caleb Williams gives me the lottery ticket upside. It's the same type of deal with all that. Matthew Stafford Absolutely. Fits in there. He's the he's equivalent to what we've called years, the Kirk Cousins put on your khaki pants and get comfortable. Like, it's not flashy, but it'll get the job done and you won't be upset with it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to running back. This is where I think the wheels come off a little bit. We've got Kyren Williams, currently RB8 in the rankings, 27 overall. ADP is RB7, going the 4th pick of the 2nd round. They drafted Blake Corum to come in and be the backup. He's ranked 44 and 142 overall. ADP is RB39 in the late 10th. And then, of course, they round out the roster with a bunch of guys that you don't really want to care about for fantasy purposes. But Kyren Williams has not really been the picture of health his entire career. How do you feel about a high 2nd round pick, Mason, for Kyren Williams?
So Kyren is weird because I love watching Kyren play. And yes, we do have to talk about, the potential injury issues. I'm not quite as concerned about that. I think that one of the things we do have to let him kind of get his feet wet and really, it's troubling that a really big workload like that did hamper his season and he did have some injury issues, but that's something that only time will tell if that's a huge issue. On the field, when we do see him on the field, he's fantastic. He's a fantastic runner. He's top 10 in forced missed tackles, top 6 in yards per carry, top 8 in explosive runs. So he is a fantastic runner. He doesn't have a ton of receiving ability, which we'll get into in a second, which is one of the kind of holes I think that this backfield has for sure. But Kyron's one of the best in zone concepts. He had 6.2 yards per carry in them last year. It's just a little bit odd though, because I think most people, myself included, when we picture Rams offenses and when we picture Sean McVay offenses, we think of a lot of outside zone concepts. And while they do run a bunch of outside zone concepts, they have steadily creeped up over the last few years to being the team running the most gap concepts in the NFL. So their entire run game philosophy has kind of shifted. And it still didn't seem to matter for Kyren Williams. So that's why I say it's a little bit of a weird spot for Kyren Williams. You're not quite sure if the production last year was an outlier when he was on the field, but he is a supremely talented player. Now, for the price, you might go in a different direction there. I think it does make up some of your team makeup, but we have some questions a little bit further down this backfield too, for sure. So,
I'm pretty comfortable with the price here at the top of the 2nd. I understand there's some concern with the health and whatnot, but I feel like all running backs in this area are going to have concerns, and I think they have more consistent concerns than I would have with Kyren Williams, because Kyren Williams has no competition for touches. If you're looking at other guys in this range, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's competing with David Montgomery. Jonathan Taylor, he's going to be competing with Anthony Richardson. Saquon Barkley is going to be competing with Jalen Hurts. All these guys have competition for touches, whereas Kyren Williams led the league in rushing touches last year at 19 per game. He added up just under 3 receptions per game. So obviously it's not a ton of receiving work, but he's averaging almost 22 touches per game when he did play last year. That's phenomenal. No competition. I'm willing to pay the price for him at the top of the second rather than pass on him and have to deal with some other guys as, my starting running back like Pacheco or Devin Achane. I'd much rather take a swing on Kyren Williams there at the top of the second and take the risk that or take the chance that he's going to stay healthy for most of the season.
And this is one of the things that I like to talk about when you talk about like talent level of backs, especially when we talk about these guys in the second and even the top tiers. It does partially come down to situation, but then it also does come down to just pure talent level. And I talk about it all the time on these shows, but the thing that I look at specifically when I'm scouting backs is vision and contact balance. And that's something that Kyren Williams has in spades. And so when you have that, the sky is really the limit for a talent level like that. So,
I think the big holdup for me is really just what I'm sacrificing. It's like, I understand the upside with Williams. I have no problem with the talent or anything like that. Even the injury history, like I mentioned, isn't extremely scary, but if I have somebody like Saquon Barkley, I feel like I can trust Saquon Barkley more, even in a different offense who also has had injury history himself. And like you're talking about, Vishaal, the goal line, especially dealing with Jalen Hurts, how that's going to impact his fantasy production this season. Marvin Harrison's the outlier. I definitely wouldn't do that high up. That's up there in the ADP right now as well. But you got Devontae Adams, Drake London, Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk, which I have questions about. We'll get into that with San Francisco. Maybe not. Maybe we won't get into that with San Francisco. We'll see, depending on what the rumor mill is saying.
It really
Devin
depends, I
Achane,
think, like what you did in the first round, though, right? Like if you passed on running back in the first round, can you really pass on running back again in the second round and wait till round 3 to take your RB1? If you were able to get one of those top 3 or 4 guys in round 1 in running back, then I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You can start looking at some of these receivers like Devontae Adams or whoever. But if you're
really
still
with
waiting on RB1, it's tough.
With how RB is going, I actually, believe it or not, I actually feel a little bit better about it that way, because with how the ADP is going, theoretically, I could end up with Breece Hall in the first round and then come back around and Kyren Williams is my RB2. If he's my RB2, I feel great about it. Now I've punted wide receiver and I'm just going to hammer it for the next 4 or 5 rounds. But I actually feel pretty good about that room. If I get AJ Brown or who we're going to talk about here next in Puka Nacua, and I've got a stud wide receiver, do I want to come back and get Kyren Williams, or do I want to get another wideout, double tap that, and then wait until effectively the same position in the 3rd round and end up with like in Isaiah Pacheco or Rashad White?
Yeah, I'm going to assume on Kyren if it was me. That's the way I'd go. I feel much more comfortable with Kyren there at RB1, and there's a lot of depth at receiver, I think, that you'll feel comfortable with. You can kind of figure out who you want to play on a week by week basis. Just trying to go with one of those guys that you mentioned as RB1 though for a full, 14 game regular season in fantasy. That's tough to feel like.
And this is a question for all of you, for everybody out there who's drafting 10, 11, 12 in your draft.
Yep.
This is a valid question for you because your draft strategy is going to be looking at the top 5, 6, 7, 8 receivers probably off of the board. And this top tier of backs probably gone. You are living in this 2-tier range of backs, and you probably are going to live to double tap. Yeah. So you're either gonna double tap, or like you said, we're gonna try to figure out how our roster construction is and see maybe there's some guys you want to target a little bit later. That's fine. But you are going to be taking a running back in this range in your first or second pick in that, like I said, 10 to 12 range. And then that first half of that, or that first few picks of the second round, this is going to be your cream of the crop. So you're going to need to decide which of these guys you like better. Is it Jonathan Taylor up there? Is it Saquon Barkley? Is it Kyren Williams? Is it Derrick Henry? Is it Gibbs? You know, like we've talked about, I don't really think you can go terribly wrong with any of them. I think it's kind of your factor flavor. I do kind of side with you there, though, Steve. I actually am saying this because I just literally did this in a draft that I just had, and I double tapped at the 11th pick. I took Jonathan Taylor, and then at the turn, I took Saquon Barkley. So it is a question that you're going to have to ask, and maybe you feel a different way about it, and depends on how your board falls. So
yeah, that's kind of my point. Is that for me, I feel like because of where you are in the back end of the draft there, you're really not going to be able to make up the gap at wide receiver between the guys in the top end of the board. So instead of chasing wide receiver, I'm probably going to double tap 2 top 5-ish running backs if I can get them and just dominate that position since wide receiver is off the board for me. Right. I'll just fill in wide receiver with guys that I can throughout the season and have 2 really solid backs that I can rely on. If Kyren Williams is my 2, I love it. I feel great about it. If Kyren Williams is my 1 and I've got 1 wide receiver and 1 Kyren Williams, and that's what I'm building my team around, I am uneasy going into the season. But that's just me. What about Blake Corum? He is a darling of the 0 RB community, and I believe it's because of the health issues that we've talked about. But he is in the 10th round right now in ADP, and he is one of those where if you completely punt on running back, people are in on Blake Corum as somebody who could swing upside into a top 20 back.
I'm sorry, but no. But no. As a former 0 RB truther and still from time to time dabble in it, Corum is a handcuff and nothing more. Well, he's not your answer. He's not going to come in and overtake, and you shouldn't be banking your draft strategy on Kyren Williams getting hurt because, like we've said, while the injury history is something you have to question, the production on the field speaks for itself. And when we look at Blake Corum, I think, are some people thinking he's going to catch the ball for them? I'm not sure they've watched his receptions tape, because like a quarter of his catches are the little pitch pass that, 10 years ago was illegal as a forward pitch. So it's like, I don't know that we can necessarily call him a receiving threat or even much of a blocker there for them. And a lot of his production in the receiving game is all schemes and just blown coverages. So you
said there too, like he's a handcuff. Would you even call him the handcuff? That's my question, because this is a situation where I believe if Williams goes down, maybe he's the RB1 on the depth chart, but this is probably a committee. There's no way he's the workhorse, is he?
No. Yeah, no. Probably not. I wouldn't say so.
They got 3 other guys on the roster right now: Ronnie Rivers, Boston Scott, and Zach Evans, and not all of them are going to make the team. But they're going to have depth at running back. If something were to happen to Williams, especially long-term, if they didn't have somebody on the roster, they'd add him. I don't buy that Blake Corum would suddenly be a viable starter week in and week out, maybe as a desperation flex, but I don't see him as being an immediate plug and play if something happens to Williams.
Yeah, no, I am right there with you, and I agree.
Not somebody I'm going to be rostering this year whatsoever.
And especially at that price too, because if you're talking about like a 15th, 16th round flyer, sure, why not? But 10th round, there's still decent players out there available that I can take over a guy who's probably not going to touch the ball much in his rookie year.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, wide receiver. Let's get into the meat of this, shall we? Out of completely nowhere, Puka Nacua goes off last season, has a Cooper Kupp-esque breakout. Wide receiver 8 in the rankings, 12 overall. ADP is wide receiver 7, going at the 110, back end of the first. Cooper Kupp ain't dead yet. He's still there. Wide receiver 18 in the rankings, 31 overall. Wide receiver 22 in ADP. The people are scared. 4th round, 5th pick. So Puka Nacua, Cooper Cup. First of all, Puka, do we buy the rookie season? Can he reignite the magic, catch lightning in a bottle again, and have, a first round pick worth season? Vishaal?
I believe the talent, like you don't catch as many balls as he did last season by chance.
You don't make some of the catches he made without the talent, right?
Those are not easy catches. I would say the vast majority of them were highly difficult in like the top 1% of difficulty in catches he made last season. So that's not luck. That's not chance. That's skill. He is a legit NFL player. When it comes to fantasy, though, is he a first round pick? That's tough. I mean, that's a lot of value to place on a guy who's only done it for one season and has a ton of competition in terms of targets to go around in the Cooper Cup. I feel like there's other guys I would feel way more comfortable taking at the back end of the first round. We talked about some of these running backs. There's some other receivers there, whether it's AJ Brown, Marvin Harrison, who I feel a lot more comfortable just because I've seen it for a longer period of time. They just, I feel like, have higher floors. So love the player, love the talent. Top at end of the first round, too high for me.
Yeah. So for me, the big question is, this is the guy that led the league in drops by a wide margin. Is he going to take strides in not dropping that many balls this year? Well, history tells us yes, that generally drops are a pretty volatile metric. They don't tend to continue, while, there are outliers of some players that do lead the league in drops 2 years in a row. It's few and far between. So we can expect him to not have 14 drops again this year. Now, that's still a question, though. How many drops does he have? How much does he improve by this? And does it matter? Because it's not like he didn't have a very, very productive year regardless. 8th in total receptions. And the big thing is he was 5th in yards after catch. So when you're making plays after the catch, sometimes you can get away with dropping a couple. With that being said, I'm hesitant. Now, if he were to fall and slide like the middle of the second, you can get him for a discount. Love it. Go ahead, scoop him up. But I think this is definitely a bit rich for my blood, especially when we talk about Cooper Kupp here in a second, where I have written down in my notes here, and after watching their tape and how they align, McVay loves to get creative in his alignment. He does stacks. He does motion to get his guys in and out of stacks. He does roll swaps. Sometimes they'll just swap roles right before, like pre-snap, and just swap spots. And what we see is, while Kupp is a guy that primarily mans their slot, and Nacua, while they've both been on the field, Nacua early on kind of played that Kupp role where he played, both roles, but now he's more primarily to the outside. Well, they have like the same damn number of targets every game while they're both on the field. 7.9 for Nacua, 7.6 for Kupp. I'm a little bit more comfortable taking a guy that, isn't that far removed from one of the most productive years in NFL history, and still a really talented player and an excellent route runner in Cooper Kupp. So
yeah, it's like we had just talked about with Kyron. Like if I have a solid wide receiver 1 and I take Kyron as my running back 1, I don't feel great about it, but at least I'm a little more comfortable. If I end up with Puka, I really want somebody with my second pick that I know I can cash in on coming out in the second round. So do I double tap and take like a Devontae Adams? Do I get a Marvin Harrison? So you're playing 2 young guys looking for huge upside from both, something like that, where I would be very nervous building my roster around 2 guys like that early. And then you just mentioned, like, Cooper Kupp had a huge season a couple years ago, was the number 1 wide receiver for a couple of years with the Rams in this system with Matthew Stafford. And now Puka effectively takes his spot after the injury, right? Overtakes him for the number 1 spot in the wide receiver depth chart. And now he's being faded by the public. Like I said, wide receiver 18 in the rankings and 31 overall, but wide receiver 22 in ADP going middle of the 4th round. Like, the public has given up on Cooper Kupp, it seems like, in comparison to what he's being ranked as. And it just feels like when they get to that 4th round, people are more comfortable at that point trying to either swing for upside or they're taking guys at their running back positions because they already pounded wide receiver in the first 2 or 3 rounds. So if you take running back early, I mean, this is a pot, like I was saying, there's a chance I end up with Breece Hall in the first round, come back around and get Kyron Williams as my RB2. And then you're telling me that I come back in the late third and I can have Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 1 and get somebody like a DJ Moore or a Michael Pittman as my wide receiver 2. I'm loving life if that's how my draft starts. So I'd feel pretty good about that if I can get a value on Cooper Kupp here.
And you guys, this is the strat I'm picking at the end of all my drafts this year for this reason. This team layout, the value on running back is at the end of the end of the last picks, 10, 11, 12. Because it literally is exactly what you just said, Steve. I'm through 6, 7, 8 rounds of a draft, of a slow draft.
Yeah.
My team is double tapped at running back, like I said previously, and then double tapped at wide receiver, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman. I had that option at Cooper Kupp. I went a slightly different direction, but I loved the value there and almost snagged him right there. So this is a very real possibility, you guys.
Yeah, that all makes total sense to me. If that was my roster going into round 5 of draft, I would feel totally comfortable. A lot of high floor players with plenty of upside that you feel comfortable at that price tag. And yeah, Cooper Kupp is still a beast. Guys get hurt. They miss some time. It happens. This is the NFL. That doesn't mean they're diminished in any way whatsoever. He was literally the best guy in the league a couple of years ago. He might not be right at the very top, but he's still probably a top 10 guy in the league. Getting him in the end of the third or somewhere in the fourth would be phenomenal value. That's hard to pass up. And yeah, you'd much rather have that at the third or fourth than trying to take Puka at the end of the first. That's just significantly better value. No doubt about it.
It's crazy how things change, right? The more they change, the more they stay the same. Because when Neil and I started this website years ago, we were the ones pounding the table for, guys, I'm telling you, you got the 10, 11, 12 pick. You got to double tap wide receiver. I know everybody else is going running back in the first round and you're panicked. You got to double tap wide receiver. Well, now here we are in the year 2024, and you look at ADP, and the number 2 running back is coming off the board at the 8th pick. And guys, you got to double tap running back. The value is there. You take what the board is giving you. You got to be prepared to adjust, and just when the rest of the league is zigging, you got to zag. And now it's all about running back.
Our thing here is that time is a flat circle, you guys.
Yeah,
as you've seen, every chart that Steve ends up dropping is a circle.
Yep.
We're right here, and then it goes here, and then we're gonna be here next season, and then they'll be over here, and rinse and repeat, and that's how these things work. So,
by 2029, the first round will be 10 running backs again, and we'll be having the same conversation.
Going
right back to where we were. But for now, if you're at the end of that first round, you want running backs because that's where all the value is sitting. Tight end to close it out is kind of weird. Tyler Higbee is coming back. However, he's coming off the ACL injury. Strong possibility he starts the season on PUP, doesn't play the first 6 weeks plus, depending on how he recovers. Plus, coming back from an ACL injury in general is always difficult. And they signed Colby Parkinson in the offseason to a 3-year deal. He should theoretically start the season as the starter because of that. But then do they eat into each other, or do they battle each other for the starting role? And if either one of them emerges as a starter, do you care? I would say you're good to leave the draft room without either one of them. And honestly, you probably aren't going to end up picking either one of them up throughout the season at any point, unless, I don't know, Higbee comes back and just has 2 catches for 2 touchdowns every game, because they're just throwing it to him from the 2-yard line for no apparent reason. But that's about it. Unless one of them just keeps accidentally falling into the end zone multiple times, I don't think either of these guys is worth rostering. Do you guys?
No, I think you're only picking him up off waiver, like you said, if Kupp or Nakua gets hurt.
Desperation, right? Matchup based and desperation.
There's not enough targets in the passing game to feed either of them when you got Nakua and Kupp there. So,
scheme is just doesn't equate to. I mean, we're talking about receiving back earlier, and I was talking about they don't have one. Well, sometimes it doesn't matter. They don't throw to the back anyway. They don't throw to the tight end that much either. And the reason being, I mean, a little bit more than the back, but the reason being is because that outlet in their scheme is guys in the slot like Kupp. So,
Well, yeah, their red zone target in the end zone is Cooper Kupp.
right. So that doesn't really fit that mold that we get out of some offenses, just does not fit here, which is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of modern fantasy football strat in theory. So when you do look at that, if you are looking for the third option in this offense, it's not in the tight end room. It's probably Demarcus Robinson because he had a slightly, up swing on the end of his season, but that's still not noteworthy. As you notice, we didn't quite mention him very much in our at all in our wide receiver talk. But you don't really want the third target in this offense anyway, because all of the production is going to be going to feeding these two monster target guys in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua.
100%. All right. That's the Rams. Quick, painless. Well, maybe a little bit painful. I don't know. A little bit. Tomorrow, we're taking our talents to Miami. That's right. Neil can continue to use his gone to Cincinnati joke every year. I will continue to take my talents to Miami. That's it for this week. But again, appreciate you guys being here. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Till tomorrow, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!